Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Editor, proudly brought to you by IRZ. This morning I'm having coffee with Andrew Thornburn. He is the CEO of Galison. They are manufacturers and suppliers of rolling stock for underground and surface rail applications. Thank you, Andrews, for joining us this morning. For our readers who don't know Galison, maybe just tell us a little bit about the company and what it is you do.
So Galison is a 40-year-old company. It's got its roots, it's a family-owned business. It has its roots in the mining industry, in particular the gold mining industry. It started as a business manufacturing various items but specializing in underground rolling stock, carrying gold ore, platinum ore, etc. underground in what a lot of people call cuckoo pans, but get a lot bigger than that obviously. And various other steel structures for underground. It carried on like that for probably 20 years, expanding into the platinum industry, into the diamond industry in Botswana, and various other smaller exports. Approximately 20 years ago, whilst continuing to make underground rolling stock, Galison also started making mainline railway freight wagons, again mostly for the mining industry. We bought out a company that gone into liquidation called Hunslet Hudson, and they had been the main designer and suppliers of freight wagons carrying ore between the various shafts and the plants. So running on private rail systems, but the same gauge and the same concept and the same braking systems as would run on the mainline railway. And that was a very successful takeover. We took over a lot of the people that designed the wagons, that built the wagons, and we expanded from there, building mostly about 60 to 80 ton or self-discharge wagons, again for the big gold mines, the big platinum mines. Expanded into Zambia and got very involved in the copper belt when that was privatized in 2000. So we've made wagons for a lot of the big copper mines up there as well. So that continued for about 10 or 15 years, and recently we've had a real emphasis on expanding our knowledge of mainline freight wagons into some of, not just the smaller private rail operators, but into the larger rail networks outside of South Africa. So we're now pursuing and have been successful with building freight wagons for some of the networks in Mozambique, again looking in Zambia, in the DRC, in Angola.
What is your outlook for the rail industry, and particularly this is impacted by the mining sector?
So for the rail industry, unfortunately, we can't really look at the South African rail industry. We're completely locked out by state-owned operator. Although we do see that there should be some growth in freight from mines in South Africa to the ports. It isn't a market that's open to us because Transnet built their own wagons and wouldn't allow outsiders to be building wagons. Well, we don't think there's a chance for building wagons there. So we concentrate on pursuing the freight for mostly the larger copper mines up in Zambia and the DRC, and there's a lot of expansion going on there at the moment. There's a lot of new mines being built, and the roads have just become completely clogged up. It's almost impossible to get across border posts further north in South Africa by road. The delays are days on end. So we see growth in bringing material to the mines, such as fuel, sulfur, etc., and getting the copper from the mines to the ports. And there's a number of options. So options for doing that. There's the line down to Lobito in Angola that is of interest. There's the Tazara line that is of interest. The CDN line to Nakala is being looked at, and there is also the north-south from Zambia down to Durban. Following hopefully the success of some of the larger logistics and railway companies in this country as they try and open up those lines. companies like Traction, companies like Grindrod, and then some of the logistics companies working out of the copper belt.
So I assume, aside from manufacturing for either the mining house or the railway operator, you're also manufacturing rolling stock, or could manufacture rolling stock for the leasing companies as well.
Correct. That the leasing companies would definitely be who would be looking to manufacture for, and we have had some success in that sphere. We manufactured 100 grain wagons that operate on the CDN line between Kala and Blantyre in Malawi, and those were sold to GPRS, which was a division of Grindrod that continued to lease those wagons to CDN, bringing all the wheat to Malawi. And that was, I think, a very successful venture, both for ourselves, for the leasing company, and for CDN. They've now been operating for 3 years. So our big selling point there was that we try and not just build wagons as they've been built for the last 40 years and just build a standard wagon that has always been built. We've really tried to look at making more modern, efficient wagons.
So that would bring me into my next question. We're all looking at the Internet of Things and smart technologies and digitalization, and actually there are some basic things that one could do to pull through efficiencies in one's operations through increasing volumes, which would then come down to the rolling stock, would it not?
Correct. So I think people, because there hasn't really been competition, some people have just traditionally built railway wagons out of standard steel, build them as strong as possible, they last for 40 years. They've not really thought about how efficiently a wagon can transport goods. And in fact, just like the road and trucking industry, the lighter the wagon is, the more goods it can carry, because you've got a limit on your axle load.
Especially in Africa.
Especially in Africa. So on the main line where you've got a 26-ton axle load, that is not as important. But when you start operating in Africa, where you have axle loads going down to 18.5 tons per axle, 15, and in the DRC even 12 tons per axle, the tear weight of your wagon can be crucial in the amount of goods you can carry and whether it's profitable to use rail or not.
You've done a lot of design work
Correct.
around this.
We're quite a large company. We can do pretty big projects, but we're small enough as well that we really like to be flexible and work around exactly what's right for the client. So we are able to design a different wagon basically for each application. So for instance, the wagon that we built carrying grain in Mozambique, we looked very carefully at the size of the gauge that they could move, the rail gauge, obviously the size of the gauge that the wagons could move through, the heights and widths that were available, the maximum lengths that were available, and obviously the axle loading, and came up with the most efficient method that we could come up with to carry the grain and still be cost effective. So we've really looked at extensively at using lightweight, weather-resistant, high-strength steel to minimize the weight of the wagon and therefore bring up the maximum capacity. The grain wagons, for instance, we managed to get a tear of just over 19 tons, whereas our competitors' tear was in the region of 25 tons. So we were able to carry over 5 tons more per wagon. If you put a 40 wagon train, you're carrying 200 tons more per train with the same amount of diesel, etc. It makes a massive difference to the cost efficiency of the operation.
And whether rail then becomes more efficient than road.
Correct. And it's not such an easy thing to do, working with this lightweight steel. If you just make everything thinner, you start to get flexibility. It's still very flexible, so you have to know how to work with the steel and design around it. And luckily, so a lot of our underground operations, especially where they do what are called inclines, where you have skips running on inclines. Lightweight steel construction has been important for many years. So we've had a lot of experience, and so we didn't come in from nowhere. So we were able to draw that experience from our underground wagons. We're probably the world's leading underground wagon manufacturer, in fact, and bring that to some of the surface operations.
And then your flat wagon?
Been approached by companies interested in carrying containers, again, especially up into Central Africa, where the axle loads are low, to get as lightweight as possible flat or container wagon. Again, if you're carrying a commodity like copper, the lighter the wagon, the more you can carry, because the SG of copper is very high. So the limiting factor is always weight. And again we took our experience with these high strength steels and designed a wagon where we cut everything out that wasn't necessary and yet still kept the strength and integrity, and we've managed to come up with a narrow gauge container wagon that can carry either one 40-foot container or two 20-foot containers that has a tear weight under 13 tons. And that is actually being tested on some of the lines in Southern Africa extensively as we speak, with a lot of technology on it, measuring the various forces that are being applied to it with various loads, speeds it's traveling, all satellite based and GPS based, and we should have results from those tests in the next few months.
You're also one of the few companies that are exporting to China.
Yes, so we do quite a lot of work with China. We do import components from China. We feel like you've got to be part of the global economy. If you want to be as efficient as possible, you've got to source from various places. You can't just blindly, locally produce, although clearly we have a factory we want to keep full. But I believe in a global sort of outlook. So we do source product from China, but we also sell product to China. A particular product we sold was in fact underground rolling stock. We sold 60 40-ton wagons, which we believe are the largest underground wagons ever produced in the world. They work at a copper mine 3,500 meters high in the mountains.
Wow. And
we are moving over about a 6-kilometer distance with 6 trains. We are moving further now, but it's about 1.5 million tons of rock a month. And that's, as I say, only 60 trains. The reason we got the work is we have 40 years of experience with underground rolling stock. South Africa's always had probably the largest fleet in the world, and the Chinese company wanted the best in the world. And so they came to us. We again used our experience with lightweight steels to produce, again, a very strong, very light, very durable wagon. We produced both the tipping stations and the wagons in our factory in Belgium and shipped them on great big flat rack containers to China. Wow. Where they are now operating very successfully, moving, we think, more ore than the entire South African gold mining industry. There isn't a single person underground. It's a completely autonomous operation, so the trains are not only driverless, they're not even remotely controlled from surface. The whole system thinks for itself, and they just have 1 or 2 people watching a number of the trains from surface. It's quite an eerie experience to go underground and hear absolutely nothing, and then a train just silently comes towards you, and there's nobody underground. And it's the way things have got to go. So we're very proud of that.
So there was something else that was quite unique in that system, the discharge.
Yes, our discharge station it is carefully aligned with those wagons. They're a bottom discharge wagon, and a train of 12 wagons, which is carrying 480 tons, will discharge the entire load in under a minute. So that's why it can move so much rock so quickly. It's a discharge rate probably 4 or 5 times faster than they achieve at a Richards Bay or Saldanha with wagon tipplers.
And that whole discharge centre, was that designed by Galison as well?
Yes, that was designed by Galison. again, built in South Africa. We used Siemens as partners on some of the automation and the drive units. And again, it's completely autonomous. When the train arrives, sensors pick up the train's arrived, all the gates open, and the train just moves through the tipping station autonomously, discharges its load of 480 tons and carries on going.
My goodness, that's incredible.
So we do think there's applications on surface for this type of technology as well. Again, between mine shafts and plants and so on, where you're not moving huge distances. But if you're moving a sort of 30-kilometer range and need to move a lot of rock very efficiently and quickly, this is a system that we believe is very worthwhile.
Yeah. Andrew, anything else exciting on the books for this year?
The system that we sold in China, we've had a number of inquiries from other countries around the world, and we are working quite hard on a mine in Russia, a phosphate mine that's very interested in using this system. We do have some competition from Swedish and Canadian companies, but we beat them in China, so we're confident that we can be successful again. I went to the mine. It's actually north of the Arctic Circle, which is an interesting experience. But again, they're looking for the best technology in the world, and we believe for moving rock underground, we can offer that. So that's quite exciting. We also, as I said right at the beginning, we are looking actively at getting material into the copper belt as it expands and getting material out. So we do believe that there will be scope for our lightweight wagon, and we'll be working on a number of potential opportunities there with logistics companies, leasing companies, and rail operators.
Andrew, thank you for joining me for coffee.